Sarah Jane, let's bring you more news now from the International Criminal Court. That breaking news that we brought you a short time ago, an International Criminal Court prosecutor says that there is reasonable grounds to believe the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu bears criminal responsibility for war crimes and is seeking an arrest warrant for him and others. Our international affairs correspondent Alex Rossi is with us. This document, which we've both just been ploughing through in the last few minutes, seeking arrest warrants for not only Benjamin Netanyahu, but also members of Hamas and also the Israeli Defence Minister.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty explosive stuff here that we're seeing in this document that has been issued by the chief prosecutor for the International Criminal Court. Now, what's happened, the kind of background to this is South Africa and other countries asked for an investigation. It's now been looked at and they've gone through the evidence. And the chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, says, on the basis of evidence collected and examined by my office, I have reasonable grounds to believe Yahya Sinwar, he's the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Mohammed Deif, a military commander in Gaza, and Ismail Haniyeh, who's the head of the Hamas political bureau. They bear criminal responsibility for October the 7th and what has happened. And the charges that are being looked at, the allegations are, very, very serious. Extermination as a crime against humanity, murder, taking hostages as a war crime, rape and other acts of sexual violence and torture. But in this same document, there are also allegations being made against Benjamin Netanyahu, who's the Prime Minister of Israel, and Yoav Gallant, the Minister of Defence of Israel. And these are what they're accusing these two men of: starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as a war crime, willfully causing great suffering or serious injury, willful killing, intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population, extermination and persecution as a crime against humanity. Now, what happens now is that the ICC prosecutor is seeking arrest warrants. It then now has to go through to a panel of judges. All of this evidence will be presented to them, and then they'll have to take the decision about whether or not to issue arrest warrants. But, I mean, on a note of that, the seriousness of that, particularly against the Israelis, Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, is, I'm just thinking from memory, the only others in kind of recent times, you're talking about Vladimir Putin, following the Ukraine war, an authoritarian regime. Israel, of course, presents itself as a democracy, so it wouldn't see itself in that camp. And Sudanese leader Omar al-Bashir. So again, this is going to be something that is extremely uncomfortable and difficult, not just for these two men, but also Israel as a country.
And when we look at the small print, he says in both cases, when he's looking at these charges against Hamas, some of these crimes in our assessment continue to this day. And the same with Israel. He's used similar language in both senses. And my eyes were drawn to this paragraph. Israel, like all states, has a right to take action to defend its population. That right, however, does not absolve Israel or any state of its obligation to comply with international humanitarian law, notwithstanding any military goals they may have. This means Israel chose to achieve them in Gaza. The means Israel chose to achieve them in Gaza are criminal.
Yeah.
It's incredibly strong.
I mean, it is incredibly strong. And I think you get to the crux of the matter here in terms of how this has been looked at legally. The issue, of course, isn't about launching the war. Remember, Israel experienced an atrocious terrorist attack on October the 7th. It wasn't that they didn't have the right to defend themselves. It was the manner in which they chose to do it. And wind back to the morning of October the 7th, when the world was waking up and we were starting to see some of those images from southern Israel about what had been, what Hamas had done. But you will remember, Jane, warnings from the Americans. You'll remember warnings from the British government as well to the Israelis. Be very, very careful about how you proceed. And I think it would resonate, or should have perhaps resonated more in the case of those warnings coming from the Americans, not just because they are a very close ally to the Israelis, but also they have direct experience of this in terms of September the 11th and the wars that were launched in the aftermath of that. Arguably, hubris, seeking revenge for what was perpetrated against the Americans, that caused huge problems in the aftermath. And I think those warnings were clear to the Israelis, but certainly you're seeing now from the ICC prosecutor that they chose to ignore those, and you now have these very serious allegations being made.